Welcome to Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. What if you could learn from experienced real estate investors, find out what got them to where they are now, get insight into their daily habits, and take these insights to inspire your own growth? Each week, Jonathan Green shares an in-depth look at the mindful approach to real estate investing. Jonathan is a lifelong real estate investor, advisor, and coach, as well as the founder and team leader of Streamlined Properties. Whether you're looking to start from scratch, get to the next level, or just for a straightforward and honest approach to real estate investing, Jonathan seeks to provide a free mentorship program you can take with you anywhere. Now, here's Jonathan.
Welcome back to another episode of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. My guest today is Owen Barrett of Shine. What is Shine? It's built by apartment owners for apartment owners. They are a team of clean energy pros, master electricians, and tech entrepreneurs on a mission to help apartment owners monetize on-site solar. We haven't done a show like this before. Let's go. This is episode 256 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with my guest, Owen Barrett. Owen is the Chief Executive Officer of Shine. Shine enables owners of apartment buildings to make more money with solar, and he's the founder and president of ZNE Capital, and ZNE stands for Zero Net Energy, which we're going to talk about. Owen, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk solar and the applicability to large-scale multifamily. Which came first for you, your interest in solar or your interest in real estate? Because now you're putting them all together.
Well, like a lot of people that start off, I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad a long time ago. So I had an interest in real estate, but I didn't have any money. So I made money in solar and then I reverted back to real estate. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you think when you started in solar that there might be applicability long term, or were you still just like, hey, let's get this business rolling, see what happens, and see if it applies to how much?
Yeah, I didn't actually. I mean, when I, after reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad and like a lot of listeners to real estate podcasts, I first thought about single family. I was thinking about the Burr strategy.
Yeah.
And so I was not at all familiar with multifamily investing, syndications, et cetera. So I've always been driven by like how big of an impact can I have? And so residential solar, it's hard to have impact because the systems are just so small per installation. Yeah. So I hadn't connected the dots yet. It took a while before I started to realize that there was a lot of opportunity on multifamily to go after solar, which then the installations are large and you can have a big impact.
Yeah, it actually, the way that I'm thinking of it and the way that you described it scales with the way investors think as well, because a lot of people, as you said, they get into single family and then they realize, well, like having 5 single families is great, but now I'm running around to 5 different properties. Why don't I get 10 units under one roof, which is the same thing that you figured out with solar?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and I had the same mentality with investing. I was doing, I probably did a year of reading books, listening to podcasts before I really dipped my toes in the water. And our first property was a 64 unit.
Oh, wow.
And it was because of exactly that mentality. Like at the time we wanted to scale acquiring units and decarbonizing them. And so we had the same thought process of this is going to take forever if we start at a 4-plex, but if we start at a 64 unit, then we can hopefully grow a lot faster.
Well, what do you think got you, though, from reading the book and then taking action large? Because a lot of people tell this story, especially on this podcast, where they do exactly what you avoided. Let me go 2, then I'll go 4. I'll try an 8. Wait, this is a pain. Now let me go 50. How did you know that you could skip those steps? Like, what gave you the confidence from reading podcasts to action at 64?
I don't know if it was confidence or ignorance or maybe a little bit of both. I was in a unique position. I had already sort of hit financial independence through a previous startup. And so I was really coming into real estate first, I guess, because I thought it was a fun way to just invest passively.
Yeah.
But as I started to really kind of connect the dots between multifamily investing and the opportunity to deploy solar, I was less driven financially and more driven by environmental impact.
Yeah.
And so for me, I didn't want to waste my time starting on a duplex. I knew that the impact would be too small. It would take too long. And so it wasn't whether or not I should start on larger properties. It was more, if I want to focus on trying to decarbonize multifamily, I have to start on
Yeah,
larger
yeah.
properties. So then backing into how do you do that and kind of go, using that as your starting point.
Yeah, if we could just back up on solar in general, because I've had solar before, but I found just what you're saying, like on a small scale, it's functionally very difficult. There's like solar salespeople for one house, but you really feel like you're being sold, pitched, which
Yeah.
you are. And
Yeah.
there's certainly great environmental impact. But overall, when you go to sell a house with solar, you either have leased or owned. So it could be a burden in the sale where people are like thinking, hey, everybody just wants solar. No, not everyone wants that on their roof on just a single family residential. And these are problems that I think you solve with multifamily. But did you see that in the beginning in your solar career, that it's just a different breed from what you're talking about? And this just selling it for a one-off is harder, and it's harder understanding for people for their own house and then for the long-term sale value.
Yeah, I think everyone would want solar on their house if it were owned and operating correctly. I think where you start to get people kind of pushing back on, is this really worth it? If there's a third party ownership model where it's leased or owned by like a Sunrun, a lot of times, unfortunately, solar systems are not working as long as they should. I mean, there's supposed to be a 25-year lifespan, but they don't always last that long because sometimes low quality materials are installed. So like, I agree, solar has become sort of it's not always good. But if you install it the right way and you think about who your customer is, for us, it's multifamily. We never pitch like third party owned systems because we don't want $1 million solar system holding up the sale of a $40 million apartment building.
Yeah.
So I think you have to really understand the segment that you're selling to in order to position it in a way that's truly valuable. And, we don't ever forget that the main business of our customers is owning and operating real estate. It's not energy. So if it's truly value add, then they're interested. But if there's any risk that it's going to hold up, a transaction, then we immediately lose interest.
It's a really good point, though, because I think if you're looking at it from an investor's point of view and they're a strict yield investor, and sure, environmental impact is like an ancillary benefit, but not necessarily to the tenants. It's not like you can say, hey, we're going to charge you $10 more a month because we have solar. Tenants just don't care. They'd want to save the $10. So that changes the pitch, but it also changes what you can do. So you guys as a company can have a full environmental impact, but you still have to pitch it differently to those yield investors, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in the clean technology space since 2010, and I got into it because I do have a true passion for the positive environmental benefit. In those 14 years, I've never once ever pitched a project of, hey, this is a good idea because of the environmental impact. Right. It just doesn't work, right? Nobody buys $1 million solar systems because of how many tons of carbon it's going to save. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So fortunately, I started off in finance and I kind of got a really good foundational education of financial analysis. And I've always pitched dollars because that's how decisions are made.
Yeah.
It's great that our projects have positive environmental impact, but that's generally not why people are making decisions.
Yeah. I mean, I think multifamily owners, and you probably can talk to this, can definitely use it to their advantage long term if they start to build themselves as a more eco-friendly multifamily development. And they go that way. I think it's great, and I think it can be used. But I can see it, like it still has to make sense on the bottom line, as you said. Not going to just start this new billing and overpay for something that residents won't care about.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, our customers kind of fall into one of two categories. They're either syndicators or they're institutional. Syndicators are generally implementing solar because it improves yield, like you said.
Yeah.
The institutional group is implementing solar because it improves yield, but it also helps them with their ESG scorecards. So a lot of them are kind of reporting, different environmental metrics to different just annual reporting companies or competitions. And so it helps them in that regard too. So it does depend kind of which side of the fence our customers fall on. But either way, we lead with the cash flow conversation.
Yeah. And are they able to do cost seg on the solar installation? That's obviously the tax benefits and cost segregation opportunities could be huge if you're doing a big project over 100 units.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so solar is eligible for bonus depreciation, which, is on its way of getting phased out, but it's probably going to come back here with the new administration.
Right. If it goes to 100%, it's even more advantageous to what we're talking about now, because you can take a very large, 100 unit solar thing and depreciate it all right away.
Exactly. And then there's federal tax credits, at least right now. Again, a lot of the things in the solar landscape are potentially changing.
Yeah,
Nothing's
yeah.
really changed yet. But yeah, depreciation is a great benefit. There's tax credits, which thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act, you can sell for cash, which is huge because if a real estate company has a ton of depreciation, then a federal tax credit is effectively worthless. But if now we can sell that tax credit for cash and pay down or either pay back CapEx or pay down a loan principal on a solar loan, then it just helps the unit economics on the solar project.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you brought something up. I mean, right now, of course, we're recording April 23rd, 2025. It's going to come out in early July. But, things are in flux. We don't know kind of day to day right now what's going to happen, especially things which are like, environmentally friendly. How do you deal with that when you're in a company that, things could change rapidly? You'll be able to figure it out, but you really don't know what's around the curve with, if they're going to take away some tax incentives. We just have no idea.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely scary. I mean, tariffs obviously could affect solar. The tax credits could affect solar. I think, I've been in the energy space long enough that I've seen it before. Like there's always tariffs, there's always things happening, rebates change, tax credits change. And so you just have to be nimble. I think the one thing that keeps me kind of optimistic about potential changes are, unfortunately, climate has been politicized, which it is what it is. But I feel like the Republicans are really the ones that are kind of leading the desire to win the AI race. So for the next 4 years, we have Republicans in office more than likely. And you can't have AI or you can't win AI without more energy. Just matter of fact, it's super energy intense. We don't have enough of it. We need more energy if we want to win AI.
Absolutely.
In 2024, 90% of every new electron that came online was from renewable sources. And that's not because of rebates or incentives. It's just because of supply chain logistics. So you can get renewables online faster than you can get fossil fuel energy. So my hope is that if we can take sort of a strategic view on AI, then we have to build out more energy and renewables have to be a piece of that. So removing like the tax credits or depreciation benefits from solar is just going to hurt our odds of winning the AI race.
Yeah. It makes a lot of sense to me. I've talked about it on a couple of different podcasts, but especially if commercial real estate, what's becoming extremely advantageous to people is this kind of light industrial where they can put in these things that are going to power, high-end computer systems and huge blocks. Those still need to be powered by something, and we're in the energy shortage. So figuring out all the other opportunities to put that in there is really going to be key. That's what you're saying, but I think it's a really interesting thought on real estate plus environmentally friendly, and also being smart and not saying like, hey, we're not getting phased out. We just have to kind of see which way we need to kind of pivot as it goes.
Yeah, I mean, I there's crazy people on either end of the spectrum, but I think sort of the more moderate folks in the middle, everyone can agree that we need more energy, and that energy is going to come from fossil fuel sources and it's going to come from renewable sources. Yeah. That's not a bad thing. Like you can't just phase out fossil fuels overnight. So I tend to just take the more pragmatic approach of like what's best for the country, and what's best for the country is just getting as many electrons online as fast as possible.
Yeah. So, I mean, when you're pitching for a large scale multifamily, or when you started, first you're figuring out, hey, how much money is this going to save us? But then functionally, it can save you more money by having a kind of more streamlined, I guess, electrical grid and everything that works better because of the way you're using energy. Puts hopefully less, I guess, effects on the rest of the building in some ways.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely advantages, like second level advantages to having on-site solar. It helps out the rest of the grid. So, in theory, you'd have less risk of brownouts and blackouts if you can get more renewables on site. But yeah, I mean, we always start with the dollars. Like, what is this going to do to the project level returns of this particular investment? And then assuming that that's motivating enough to move forward, then we can talk about all the other different impacts, either on tenants or the grid or whatever it may be. But there's a lot of tangential benefits.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk functionally a little. If you're, just we'll take something 50 to 100 units. What kind of, I guess, effect does it have on residents if you're installing it? Any at all? I mean, it's not like you're doing a full rehab, but most of it, I would assume, will either go on the roof or in extra space that's on the property.
Yeah. So 9 times out of 10, we're just putting it on the roof. It's cheaper to install it in the roof than it is in, say, parking lots. And,
Yeah.
generally multifamily investors are seeking the highest yield. So they're going to do.
Yeah. Don't take away a spot that could be a playground or more parking spaces later.
Yeah, exactly. So it's usually just on the roof. On a per unit basis, the gross cost is about $6,000. That's for installation. There is a 30% tax credit. So, let's say that knocks down the net cost of $4,000.
Yeah.
On average in the US, this changes depending on location and by cost of electricity. But on average, we generate about $620 per unit per year in NOI. So, if you put a cap rate on $620 and compare that to the $4,000 that costs you to install, it's usually about 2x in value that you're getting, sometimes 3. For the tenants, the way that it works is if they're spending, say, $100 a month in electricity now, we'll install solar. Their electric bill may go down to $50. And then the owners charge them either $0 to $50. So it's entirely up to the owners. Most times we see owners giving about a 10% discount back to tenants.
Mm-hmm.
So tenants may pay $45 to the owner and get a net savings of $5. So it's a win for the owners. It's a win for the tenants. I mean, we can go, it's a win for the earth.
Yeah.
But really, I mean, from a financial perspective, tenants and owners benefit from it. So there's not a lot of pushback when we start talking to owners, property managers, tenants. There's a bit of an educational piece that has to go along with it because everyone's really sensitive to fees right now.
Yeah.
So this is an additional fee, but the savings that it generates are larger than the fee itself.
Yeah, that makes sense. It made sense a lot, though, what you said before. You're leaving more power on the grid, which we need. So if you're having all of these kind of weather issues, which we're having with climate, and there's going to be more power outages, you just may be in a better situation if you have solar up there. And I think it makes sense if, look, tenants, $5. I don't know that they're going to jump for joy over that, but at least it's not up $5.
The thing so the biggest benefit from the tenants that I would say is, I think the 3 biggest expenses of most renters are rent, groceries, and utilities.
Yeah.
And all 3 of those have skyrocketed in the last 5 years.
Yeah. Good point.
So if you're taking half of the electric costs of a tenant and you're getting it from solar, not from the utility grid, you don't need to increase that annual solar bill 10% a year like your utilities are. So you can kind of take off some of the inflationary burden of your tenants. Now, again, are you going to put this in apartments.com? Probably not, because nobody's going to get it. And that's not how they're making decisions.
Yeah.
But anything that you could do to improve retention of tenants and decrease turnover, is a huge value add, especially in today's economy.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. So, yeah, it's similar to what we were saying before. It's really about what people are looking at it for. But I can see where people get that. They get solar and then they think a couple of people responded to this. Now let's go with something, and keep going down this. And you can do that against the older buildings that are in there who are doing nothing, in your market and really press on that. And I think as time goes on and climate gets even, more adjustable and unpredictable, there may be more options for people who want to say hey, at least I'm living in a very, there's a lot of green buildings, LEED certified buildings that certainly took off. So it's not to say that this won't be more attractive to the whole base and potentially more value add for that owner at some point.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we do think that in certain markets and certain asset types, there is probably a premium for having on-site solar. I think it's probably going to be student housing in more liberal cities, but it is a net benefit to tenants everywhere. So It really just comes down to kind of how are we explaining it to tenants or how is the property management explaining it to tenants. But yeah, I agree. There is probably a premium in some markets.
Yeah, and that adjustable extra ROI that they're making from the solar, that goes into the bottom line for a syndication. So as we were saying before, you can use the cost seg and you can use the tax benefits, and that will be a big increase when you're trying to pitch to investors as an operator. But then when you look at the long term, it's going to just give you more money that you're going to be able to make because of it versus what you're making with the regular power grid.
Yeah, I mean, it can increase loan proceeds if you're getting debt based on coverage ratio. It increases cash flow, especially in year one. If you factor in the tax credit, a lot of value add deals are light on cash returns year one. So this helps out that. And then you get a big pop on disposition if you put a cap rate on the solar income that you're generating. So, I mean, we really like to think that like we own $75 million of apartment units ourselves. So we like to think that we understand the space better than any solar contractor out there. And I think that we can have really high level discussions with leadership at different real estate companies and help them understand that, yes, this has an environmental impact, but that's not why you're doing it. You're doing it because it's going to make your investment better.
That's also knowing your audience. For a lot of people out there, whatever they're pitching, if they want to get into syndications, if you come in with just the environmental point of view, like you said, you're probably going to fall short. That's not what they really want to hear. So knowing your audience, knowing how to pitch, and then having this as a kind of ancillary benefit, I think it's just a much smarter way of doing business, especially who you're dealing with because you guys are operating all these. And in the end, if someone came to you and it wasn't solar, it was something else, you would say, well, how's this going to make me money? Or that's it. I mean,
I think it's just being realistic.
Yeah, it makes sense. So when you bought that 64 unit, the intent was, hey, we're going to put solar up here and see how it works on the 64 units. Was that kind of a test project?
That was a test project. It did not go according to plan. Like most first projects do or don't. I don't know. But, we had a PCA done on it. We had an environmental site assessment done on it, just like most people do or have to do when you buy a property. And the PCA said that it had a flat TPO roof, and it said that the roof was fine. It said it had been replaced in the last 3 to 5 years. So at the time, like my background has always been kind of sales and finance. If it's been in a corporate setting, it's always been finance related to clean tech. If it's been in an entrepreneurial setting, it's always been sales and finance. I don't have like the technical background of actually installing solar.
Yeah.
So at the time at Z&E Capital, we didn't have someone sort of with the technical abilities to evaluate a roof and figure out whether or not it's going to be a good fit for solar. So we were going off the PCA. And when we finally got ready to install solar, we brought out a contractor and they're like, this roof is in terrible shape.
Yeah.
So it was a big lesson for me to, number one, like PCAs, I think, are about as useful as like a home inspection report when you buy a house. Just like a check the box for the lender. I wouldn't really.
These are things that we saw. They may blow up the whole house. They may do nothing. We don't have any idea.
Like it always says consult a contractor like for actual information.
Everything's just a cover your ass situation anyway.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it was a big lesson learned. It was really unfortunate. I mean, it's super sad to buy a property and not be able to put solar on it. But, that 64 unit led to 235 unit property that we did put solar on, and then a 232 unit that we put solar on. So it helped us do what we wanted to do, but there was a lot of things that we learned off that first one.
Yeah, and the roof is really important because obviously the solar, it weighs a decent amount, and the slope of the roof means installation is going to be different. Is there something better? I mean, are sloped roofs better for the installation than flat roofs? Because I know after you install the whole solar, it's harder to go in and make repairs to the roof. And that's kind of one of the, I guess, issues that's out there that's worth talking about.
Yeah, so it doesn't really matter if it's flat or pitched. It is cheaper to install on a pitched asphalt shingle roof than it is a flat TPO roof, but like marginally cheaper. It's not that big of an impact. I think we generally don't like to put solar on roofs that are older than 10 years old.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, that's like kind of the internal cutoff. We'll do an inspection and just make sure you can have roofs that are older that are in great shape. Solar will preserve the life of a roof because you're not getting the weather and the UVs on the roof. You're getting it on the solar now. So like that roof on the 64 unit, I mean, it's waterproof and it's still in the condition that it was when we bought the property. It was just the condition was not quite good enough for us to feel comfortable putting solar on it. So that's why we didn't do it. But yeah, I mean, roof condition is a huge part of whether or not your property's ready for solar.
But that's a big consideration because an apartment building, with a 15-year roof that's not leaking, you guys don't want to put it up. And they're like, well, we don't want to put on a new roof. So they just may pass on something. And that's where it comes to like, we really have to look at it like it is a money decision in the end. Maybe we'd like to have the benefits of solar, but we got to wait till the roof goes out. And then when the roof goes out, but then it's almost like 2 times things because you don't want them to use the solar to give. If you're in an ownership, like have you guys installed in owned areas, like where there's a full HOA as opposed to rentals? Because then I would be worried maybe they're going to assess all of the homeowners for the solar, and then, it would be an HOA issue. Were we voting yes on this for the money?
Yeah, we've deliberately stayed away from HOAs
Yeah,
because
seems smart.
I mean, you have however many people you need to make a decision. Like it's hard enough when it's one or two people at a
Yeah,
real
I
estate
agree.
company. If you have
Yeah.
a group of homeowners, it's like herding
Well,
cats.
but also to the financial things that we've been talking about. Generally, when you get to an HOA, what it comes down to is, do we all want to pay more money together or
Yeah.
no? Let's say
Yeah.
no.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I mean, there's a big opportunity there for solar on HOAs, but in a past life, I had a company and we were working with schools. And so we had to get all these projects approved by school boards. And
Yeah.
the projects, I'm pretty altruistic in the way that I come at business. Like I will not present a project that I don't think is a good idea for a customer to move forward on. So I was presenting projects that were going to save districts like tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year that could go back to books and computers, teacher salaries, whatever. And you'd have these idiotic school board members hold up decisions because their cousin thought that they were getting cancer from a windmill like 10 miles away from their house. Right. And so it would just got so frustrating. And I feel like HOAs would be, I feel like revisiting that experience.
Yeah, it's the red tape of it. I just read Abundance by Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson, and they talk a lot about how the advancing of, a lot of people think, multifamily got stopped because of all these other things, but it's really about the regulations. There's so much red tape just for you to go try to put solar on that you have to have a company like you guys who know we know how to dot all the I's and cross the T's because someone's going to say this is bad.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's a matter of time. I mean, we run into it all the time where people just make the craziest objections. And fortunately, we've heard most of them or all of them. So we always have rebuttals. But I mean, it's new. I think that's the thing, right? Like the way that we approach solar, where we're doing one small solar system per apartment unit. We're not focusing on the common area load because we don't really care about it. It's way more valuable to go after tenant load.
Yeah.
That is a completely new way to think about solar for multifamily. And multifamily is not known for being innovative.
Yeah,
so like we understand that it's going to take time. It's going to take education. Like it's going to take pilot projects. It's just not going to happen fast.
Yeah. I mean, are you guys looking to also link up with the new builds? Because there's a lot of new builds in the cycle that have kind of stalled, but they're definitely going to come back online, especially in Texas where solar is super worth putting on just because of the heat basis there. That seems like a great opportunity because then it's kind of baked into the initial costs and the build. If someone's on a syndication on that, they know it was going to be 2-3 years before they get, any money back until it's a build up and rented out.
Yeah, we haven't done a lot of new construction yet. I mean, we talk to companies all the time and it is a great fit because there's some synergies that you can do with the electrical and the roof work so that you're not like penetrating a brand new roof. But the point that you brought up is a great one. Like if you're putting solar on a new construction, you're building the cost of solar into the capital stack. And that's how we always suggest people do it when they're making acquisitions too. Like, let's be a part of your due diligence visit. Let's give you guys some hard numbers that you can put in your CapEx budget so that once you close, you have that money and now we can go install. Whereas if people are trying to figure out how to do solar post kind of after they've closed, it's a lot harder because the commercial financing options are just terrible for multifamily. And then you have people are trying to figure out, well, how are they going to raise an additional $1 million? It just gets a lot harder.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I think there's a lot more to it than people think, but I think there's a lot more advantages, especially looking forward into the future. Like you said, climate is an issue. It's going to keep coming up. Figuring out how to use the energy right is going to be a big play. And for people who are involved in multifamily syndications, as you said, this could be something that sets you apart. And I think we were talking a lot about, what tenants are going to think as occupants. But now I think we should talk about, what are limited partners looking at when they get into an investment? When you're a passive investor, sometimes you want a little bit more of that altruistic part. You want to know that it's going to make money. But if you can say, hey, we're building up and we have solar, like, that might encourage, limited partners much more than the tenants that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. I think, again, it kind of depends on who you're talking to or who you're talking about. We've had some conversations with institutional LPs that love it. I mean, they're like, if you guys can get mid-teens IRR and decrease emissions, we are all for it.
Yeah.
We just had a project get shut down in Texas because there was a pref equity partner that is living in the Stone Ages. They're like, well, we don't really understand solar. How do we know it's going to work? I'm like, this has been around for 40 years. Like, how are you this smart in your financial acumen, but you're this dumb when it comes to like technology? So I think there's both sides of the fence when it comes to LPs. I think some are going to be really supportive. And then I think you're going to have some that are just like anti-renewables, climate deniers that want nothing to do with it.
Yeah. And I mean, though, as a GP, you kind of know who you're pitching to. So if you're pitching something that's going to be more environmentally friendly, you kind of know like those are going to be out on this one anyways. Just leave them off the email on purpose.
Exactly.
So you don't have to get the feedback. And I think that's what's interesting. As you grow as a syndicator, there's a couple different buckets that you want to press, and not every person's going to want to go into every one. But yeah, I mean, it's just interesting because I'm thinking of the difference between how people look at it. And I can see, especially each year as we move forward, more LPs saying, yeah, you know what? I mean, all the numbers look good. And hey, there's also this environmental impact that's going to help and reduce the power grid nearby. Like, that's just kind of a cherry on top for some people who are using disposable income to make passive income for themselves later.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other part of the conversation too is like one of the first properties that I ever looked at when I started thinking about buying multifamily was in Mesquite, Texas. And the broker was showing it to us. And it was like the fourth time he was selling that property in 10 years. And so like how many times can you change the paint and change the countertops and increase rent $50? Like I think we're at the end of that cycle, at least for a while. So I feel like GPs, sponsors, owners need to get more sophisticated about how they're creating value, because you can't just rely on this like lipstick on the pig, raise rent strategy that's worked for the last 7 years.
I think that's a really good point. And I mean, I've had a lot of syndicators on the show, and they're talking more about amenities, co-working spaces, and things like that. Yeah. And solar is another amenity that can work. And I think this is, again, like you're saying, it's hey, can these people who are operating, can they think outside the box a little bit? Because there's a million syndications out there. There's a million apartment complexes. At some point, you have to differentiate yourself, because everyone always reminds me, look, when they're building multifamily, that's all A class. So if you're in the B class, you got to figure something out, because you're not beating the A class. And if you can beat the rest of the B class, you're going to make a lot more money in that little market than you would challenging what new builds are going to do, which new builds are generally always better than the last version.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we try not to tell people to buy a property because of solar. So like do your traditional underwriting, make sure that everything pencils, and then think about solar as sort of this value add that's going to increase project level returns like 100 to 300 basis points. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, real estate has to be about fundamentals. But if you can have these little unique things that you're doing to properties that other people are not, maybe it makes it more in demand from tenants, or maybe you're just hitting the return hurdles that you need to raise the equity to buy the deal in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, just look at the last 20 years of all the things that we found out were, toxic inside of real estate, asbestos and all of these other things that are on things. It's definitely at play. I mean, every inspection, like we were saying before, is part of, hey, these are things that could potentially harm you. So anything that has a more positive impact is probably going to be better and better going forward, I would think.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're at the very beginning of people thinking about sort of how sick they're getting from where they live. Yeah. Humans spend like the majority of their time inside, but they never really think about the impacts that their living quarters or, where they're working are having on their health. And I think that's just sort of starting to become mainstream.
Hey, it's Jonathan. I hope you're enjoying this episode with Owen. And this is a fun one because we haven't done something like solar presenting onto multifamily. So if you want more information about how to get in touch with Owen and work with Shine for your multifamily properties, go to getshine.com. You can actually calculate your solar income there. They have a solar calculator right on the homepage. Let's get back to Owen. So for someone who owns a large-scale multifamily or syndicators, operators, owners in the business, is there something that they should look for that makes their building, better other than what we said about the roof, like a better opportunity for solar, whether it be functionally or even geographically?
So it works nationwide. The only state where we've sort of done underwriting and it hasn't worked great is Kansas. Texas is a really good market. I was thinking it
would be like Alaska or something just because of the sunlight.
We haven't underwritten anything in Alaska yet. It might not work in Alaska or like really heavy snow states. But yeah, Texas is a great market. A lot of people think about Texas and cheap electricity, which is true on commercial meters. But residential meters, the meters of tenants is actually pretty expensive. It's like top third in the country. So garden style is the best use case just because you have the most available roof per unit.
Yeah.
Obviously no shade, like a lot of trees and shade is not good for solar. But outside of that, it works pretty much everywhere. I guess it depends what your return hurdles are, but we see like mid-teens IRR over 10-year holds, which is pretty strong. But yeah, so I'd say garden style pitched roofs are ideal, but you can do flat TPO roofs too.
Yeah, and I think you just have to, like we were saying before, you're going to figure out if they've just put on a new roof, they're in a good part because, as you're saying, that's going to protect the roof much longer because it's going to be under the solar in the parts where the solar is.
Yeah, I'd say, roofs under 10 years old is sort of our internal benchmark for whether or not it makes sense. Again, there's certain situations where it could be less than 10 years old, doesn't make sense, could be older than 10 years old, and it does make sense. So, but that's kind of a good line in the sand if you have an asset, just understanding the roof age.
So let's talk. Your company is called ZNE Capital, your capital company, of course, the solar company Shine. But what is zero net energy and how can it benefit multifamily? Because I don't think it's just solar. I'm sure there's other things involved in it as well.
So ZNE Capital was sort of a pipe dream. It's not really operational anymore, but I started to look at what solar could do to multifamily. And I saw that in almost every instance that I underwrote, it was accretive to the deal, which is like not how it's perceived in the industry. Most people think it just costs money. There's no benefit.
Yeah.
So my idea was that if we could go do sort of traditional value add real estate deals and layer solar on top of those, we would enhance the return profile of a traditional value add deal. And my thinking was, if we can do that and showcase it, we can help convince the rest of the industry that they should be adopting solar. And it would open up some opportunities to how we raise capital because, we wouldn't have to syndicate anymore necessarily. We could go after these private equity groups or family office that are looking for strong returns, but they also want to have environmental impact. And it worked to a certain extent. We acquired 650 units. We put solar on most of them. The returns were enhanced with solar. We were able to attract some family offices, some private equity because of the environmental impact. So all of that was great. But what was really interesting that came out of it is we were buying master metered properties because at the time that was the only way we really understood how to put solar on it.
Mm-hmm.
The challenge that we ran into with individually metered properties was if you want to install solar beyond the common area meter, you have to do one small solar system per apartment unit, which is a little bit complicated from the installation perspective.
Yeah.
But post-installation, you need some sort of automated method to bill tenants to monitor all these systems, and it didn't exist. So in 2023, we built the software to do that.
Oh, okay.
So that we could install solar on individually metered properties that we were acquiring. But right around that same time, we started to recognize really how hard it is to manage real estate. A lot of people talk about it being passive. It is not passive.
No, yeah.
Especially if you're buying master meter deals from the late 60s. There's a lot of deferred maintenance. So rather than kind of pretend to be real estate professionals who are actually very experienced in installing solar, we decided just to pivot back to installing solar utilizing the software platform that we developed. And so that's kind of when Shine was born as a turnkey solar solution for the multifamily space.
Yeah.
So ZNE kind of still exists. We still own our properties, but we're not acquiring anymore. It's more so as a kind of a testimonial to our experience in the multifamily space and to speak to our experience.
That's what I was thinking, though. I think, when I'm looking at guests for the show, I always ask, like, hey, do they have units? You know what it is? And I think you, as you're going on now, saying like, hey, do you guys want to put solar on? You can say, hey, look, we've put it on our units. We still own the units. I think that's important because there's, we're in the world of syndication. There's people who have done it. And then there's people who look like they've done it. And there's a big difference. And that's part of the hard thing for limited partner investors who are busy, want to get a good yield. Like everything looks, shiny on a PDF now. So it's very hard for them to figure out. But I think that helps with credibility to know, hey, there's buildings up, we ran it, especially know that you built a system. Because I was thinking of it as you were saying it, like okay, how's everyone going to get billed separately? Because that's a multifamily issue all the way down to two families when they only have one furnace. It's like, well,
Yeah.
one person likes it hot and one likes it cold. So why
Yeah.
would they get billed the same? So that's a kind of interesting corollary, and definitely helps figure it out for the tenants so they don't have to think, hey, we're just getting a share. We don't even use, we don't use as much electric as those people next door because they have 3 kids who both have 4 computers.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we were bouncing our head against the wall for years trying to figure out how do we install solar on individually metered properties, because the vast majority of apartments are individually metered. Like there's a couple pockets in the US, DFW, Phoenix, maybe Tulsa, Oklahoma, where for whatever reason in the 60s, there was a lot of master metered builds, but by far they're all individually metered. And so it took a long time for us to really figure out how are we going to do everything post installation if we're installing 200 small systems on a 200 unit property. And fortunately we figured it out.
Yeah. Awesome. So, I mean, what's the plans for the future? Can you expand to, is solar as beneficial if you're talking about a large building that's all retail, or is residential kind of a better fit for what solar does? Because retail, they use probably more power in some contexts, depending on what's going on inside those stores.
Yeah, no, retail is a great use case. I think the challenge with retail that you don't have in multifamily is the length of leases. So, if all of your tenants are on, 3 to 5 or 7 year leases in retail, you have to convince them mid-lease to allow you to monetize the solar.
Yeah.
Whereas with multifamily, you can force a tenant to monetize the solar within 12 months. And usually it happens a lot faster. So ultimately, owners can start monetizing solar sort of at full absorption within 12 months. It potentially could be longer with retail. So we're super laser focused on multifamily, but that's not to say we won't kind of branch out in the future.
Yeah, that makes sense though. The length of time and the pitch also is just kind of, figuring out again what's going to be the best case scenario, and do people want to agree to something in advance, as we were talking about before. Hey, well, I don't have to agree now because I still have 4.5 years on this, and I don't want to change. What my costs are on that.
Yeah, I think if I owned strip malls, I think I would start putting language in my leases so that I had the optionality to do it in the future.
Yeah.
But I don't own strip malls, so, so I'm not in the driver's seat there.
So the avatar for you guys at Shine is multifamily owners. Is there an amount of units that makes sense and an amount of units that might not make sense for the scale for both ends, for you guys as a company and for them as is it worth it?
Yeah, generally we don't try and go below 100 units on an individual installation. We have made certain exceptions here and there. Like if an owner has a big portfolio and they want to start on an 80 unit building, we'll do that.
Yeah.
In terms of units under management, we found that sort of 4,000 to 5,000 is the right minimum number because, and again, this could be different too, but solar is expensive. So your syndicators have to have the ability not only to raise equity for the deal, but raise an additional $1 million for solar. Our experience has been that some of these smaller syndicators just are struggling to raise money, especially in today's environment.
Yeah, exactly.
So you got to be able to raise money. And so there has to be some kind of minimum unit in the portfolio, unless you're really well backed by a private equity group or family office.
Yeah. So, those are ideal clients: hedge funds, private equity, people who have that amount of units under management, who want to go across the board, get the tax benefits and all the benefits for a much larger scale. That goes back to how we started the conversation, is instead of you starting small with a 4 unit, you just went to 64. Didn't work out there, but you learned how to get to 200 that way. It sounds like that's the same kind of target for what you're looking for most advantageous on all sides.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Obviously, we're working with a couple of the top 5 apartment owners on their portfolios, which is super exciting, right? Those guys own 100 properties. So the thinking is, well, if the first couple are successful, then we'll deploy across their portfolio, and that's almost unlimited business. But those types of companies have the longest decision-making process that I've ever experienced.
Yeah.
So there's this huge opportunity and potential when you talk about institutional customers. But the flip side of that is the pace at which syndicators can make decisions. This will increase our project level return 200 basis points. well, like, give me a contract and I'll
Yeah.
sign it. And so we have two very distinct customer segments. They each have very distinct sort of sales processes and timelines. We like institutional groups for certain reasons and we hate them for certain reasons.
Yeah.
We like syndicators for certain reasons and we hate them for certain reasons. So it works for everybody. I think it just kind of depends on who we're talking to on a particular day.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. Well, this has been super eye-opening for me, and I think it's interesting for people to plan, especially because we've done so many syndication episodes. There's a lot of ways to work it in the beginning, and now even if you have good roof structure and everything, I just think it's going to give people a real good opportunity. Where's the best place for people to get in touch with you and find out more about Shine?
So our website's getshine.com. There's a contact form on there. I'm on LinkedIn. I think Owen Barrett. But I don't really use any other social media. So probably those two.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I really appreciate it. So, yeah, like I said, we hadn't done a show that incorporated solar, but I really like that you've built it around your own experience because it just gives people a more trustworthy point of view than someone coming on and saying like, hey, put solar on all your multifamily. and you're specifically saying like, it's really not good for small, like they may want to get solar, but that's not what you guys do. So I think it really works for my audience. And it definitely focuses on what I think, a more mindful approach to real estate investing, which includes figuring out what's coming for us in the future and planning around it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. It's been a good conversation and hopefully your audience likes it.
Yeah. All right. Thanks a lot. That was Owen Barrett. He's the CEO of Shine. You can find them at getshine.com. I'm Jonathan Green. We'll see you next episode. Thanks for sticking around to the end so you can get a preview of who's coming up on the next episode of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. In episode 257, it's Austin Maskett. He's the Chief Investment Officer of Riverly Capital. He also has 10 plus years of experience in acquiring, managing, and optimizing multifamily and industrial assets. He also worked at Marcus and Millichap, where he specialized in multifamily. He has a strong foundation in the brokerage, deal structuring, and market analysis. We'll see you next episode with Austin.